Test one, two, test one, two.
Test one, two. There we go. We are working. We are live and direct at 8 p.m. Let's go. This is Daydreams with Dylan. Welcome to the live interactive podcast where our guests and our audience can interact together, create relationships, create communities. We have tonight Mr. Terry Tucker. How are you doing?
I'm great, Dylan. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I cannot complain. Really enjoying myself. Like I said, it's a Friday Eve. Brain's a little foggy, so we'll see if we can make it through, but I think we're pushing.
I like it.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I guess I was born and raised in Chicago. I'm a big city kind of guy. I know
Okay.
you're outside of Atlanta. I am the oldest of three boys. You cannot tell this from looking at me, but I am 6'8" tall. And I played college basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. I have a brother who's 6'7", who was a pitcher for Notre Dame. And then I have another brother who's 6'6", who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association.
Wow, really?
And then my dad was 6'5". So I kind of joked that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on whatsoever. Graduated
awesome.
from college. Moved home to find a job. I'm going to really date myself, but this was long before the internet was available. Fortunately, found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. But unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my grandmother and my father, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. In terms of my professional career, I said, marketing at Wendy's. I was a hospital administrator. I was a police officer. I did undercover narcotic work. I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. Was a school security consultant, a girls' high school basketball coach, a motivational speaker. Last year, I became an author. But for the last 9 years, I've been dealing with this very rare form of cancer. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 28 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Wow. Space Force is something incredible. I've read a little bit about it. Now, you mentioned that your family, your father or your grandfather and your grandmother both had forms of cancer. Is that correct?
My dad had breast cancer and my grandmother had lymph cancer.
Were they related to each other or were they?
No, this was my grandmother was on my mom's side. So no, that not related at all.
Wow, you've been through a lot in terms of career-wise, mentally, and through mental health with physical health, and then yourself dealing with it. How do you think that early on helping your I think I just froze. Do you think that early on helping your father and your grandmother through those terminal illnesses helped you later on?
Yeah, I think it did. When my dad was diagnosed, my dad was of a generation that didn't usually seek out medical attention when something was wrong. So when he was diagnosed with breast cancer back in the 80s, they pretty much told him to go home and die. He was stage 4, and at that time they really didn't know what to do with men with breast cancer. But he lived another 3.5 years. And the reason I think he did is because he had a purpose. He worked up to 2 weeks before he died. And I always sort of kind of tucked that in the back of my mind. It's like, you ever get to that point where, and I see people, it's been 9 years that I've been dealing with cancer. I kind of see people who just, they don't do anything. They have no purpose. They have no reason. They're just dealing with their illness. And so they kind of become their illness. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they get down, they get depressed and things like that. So, I spend a lot of time on my off weeks when I'm not in treatment doing podcasts, all over the world. And for me, that's kind of my purpose now.
So how long are you, or how far along are you with cancer right now?
So I was diagnosed in 2012, had a rare form of melanoma that appeared on the bottom of my foot, which is a very rare place. But There's the normal kind of melanoma that we all think of, some kind of you're out in the sun too much exposure to, to ultraviolet rays. Then there's another form of melanoma that I have, which is appears on the bottom of your feet or the palms of your hands. And actually, there's even a rarer form that appears in your mucous membrane, so your nose, your mouth, but it's still melanoma. So I had my the tumor cut out of my foot, had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed, and when I healed, I was put on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon, basically to keep the disease from coming back. My oncologist used to talk about kicking the can down the road. So what interferon gave me was severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years.
How did you manage to function like that?
It was ridiculous. I mean, when my oncologist suggested it, I was like, that's stupid. I mean, that made no sense to me. And she's like, well, just do the best you can. And I made it to 4 years and 7 months. So I came pretty close to that 5-year mark that she wanted. But then I had to be taken off of it because I ended up in the intensive care unit with a fever of 108 degrees, which usually is not compatible with being alive. So the drug was stopped 2017, 2018, the disease came back and I had my left foot amputated. 2019, it came back again with 2 more surgeries in my shin. And then last year, an undiagnosed tumor in my ankle grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse right in the middle of the pandemic was to have my left leg amputated. And I also found out I had tumors in my lungs. So wow. On that uplifting story,
you seem like such a mentally strong guy. I mean, you literally are the personification of like, let's do it. Let's like you're this energetic guy. I would have never have known from our interaction just talking right now about everything.
I know. I mean, that's what people say. I mean, from kind of the chest up, I look very normal. I mean, obviously, I don't have a left leg, and I'm in a wheelchair and things like that. But that's just those are the cards that I was dealt. And when I initially was diagnosed, like I said, I was a girls basketball coach in Texas, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, and I didn't think about it initially too much because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a couple of weeks, when it didn't heal, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor, a friend of mine, and he took an X-ray and he's like, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. And it was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No blood, no dark spots, nothing that would give anybody concern, but he sent it off to pathology. And then, 2 weeks later, I get the call from him. And as I said, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having telling me what was going on, the more frightened I was obviously becoming until he just laid it out. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You should go to MD Anderson in Houston to be treated. And I did. But I'll tell you, my emotions ran the gambit, initially, because I had done everything right, I thought, in my life. When my dad was sick, I made a commitment to myself. I'm like, I'm going to have a physical exam every year. I'm going to do whatever my doctor suggests in terms of testing. And I did. I'd been an athlete my whole life. I didn't abuse alcohol and drugs. I ate right. I did everything right. And yet I still have this very rare form of cancer. And nobody can tell me why.
Wow. So through it all, how have you managed to stay mentally healthy? I know you sort of talked about, finding purpose, but anybody else, given these circumstances, would have literally had excuse after excuse, but you seem as though like I'm so fascinated right now. Like you're so positive. Even when explaining the entire situation, you're so positive. Like, how have you managed to do that?
Well, I think a couple ways. We're all going to experience pain in our lives. And it doesn't have to be, cancer pain or a chronic illness or anything like that. mean, it can be as simple as you flunk an exam, at school, or you break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or you don't get the promotion that you expect at work. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, that's optional. That's what you do with that pain. Do you use it to make you stronger, to make you tougher, to make you more determined? Or do you sit down there and wallow in it and, want people to feel sorry for you and feel sorry for yourself? As I mentioned just a minute ago, yes, I did go through all those emotions. Did I, and I certainly have bad days. There's no S on my chest. I don't wear a cape. And, do I cry? Yes. Do I get down? Yes. But I just don't let myself stay there. I'm a human being. I have bad days, but I just don't let myself stay there. And one of the things that I've developed over these last 9 years are what I call my 4 truths. And I'll give them to you. They're just one sentence. I have them on a Post-it note that's right here on my desk that I see multiple times.
Yeah, let's hear
it. So
the
first one is, you've got to control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is, you need to embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more determined individual. The third one is more of I guess for lack of a better word, a legacy truth. And it's this: what we leave behind is what we weave in the hearts of other people. And the fourth one is pretty self-explanatory. It's, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I'm on this clinical trial drug now that really kind of beats me up. And I had a nurse recently come to me. She's like, Terry, nobody would think anything less of you if you got off this drug, if you stop this. Now, partially, the drug is having some success on me. It's not going to cure me, but it's going to buy me some more time. And I tried to explain to her these 4 truths, but I could tell they didn't resonate with her. And I told her, I said, look, my doctor may take me off this because it's not effective anymore, or I may die on this drug. But the bottom line is, I'm not going to quit. I always tell people, my pain is going to end. All our pain is going to end someday. For me, it may be through medication. It may be through surgery. Quite frankly, it may be when I die. But if I quit, if I give up, if I give in, I will always have pain in my life. So giving up and quitting isn't something that I do. It's not something that's in my vocabulary. And I don't think I'm any different than most people. I'm not doing anything that I don't think anybody can do if they decide that's what they want to do.
How did you come up with these 4 pillars or truths?
That's a great question. I think part of it, like the control your mind part, I had 3 knee surgeries when I was in high school. And when I finally went back playing, I remember my brain was kind of putting these negative thoughts into my mind. It was, like, hey, you've had 3 surgeries, you're probably a step slower, and coaches aren't going to want to recruit you because you've had these surgeries. And I've read all kinds of articles that say, every day we have between 60 and 70,000 thoughts that come into our brain. So the first thing you need to do is recognize that these thoughts are coming in. And that's hard to do. It's not like, well, I'm just going to be positive now. It's hard to do when all these other thoughts are filtering around in your mind. But if you think about it, our brains can hold one thought at a time. Why would you want to make that a negative thought? So I just started changing the narrative. Whenever I would think, when I would hear that, hey, you're a step slower, coaches aren't going to want to recruit you, I think, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level, and coaches are still recruiting me about coming to play for their colleges when I graduate. So no, I've got to flip that narrative into something positive. And over time, if you do that, you're eventually going to start to have more positive thoughts in your brain than you are negative ones.
Yeah, I've recently started to experience that, where sometimes it would be either insecurities or there would be just thoughts, unwanted thoughts that would enter my mind, and it's so hard to control. You're like, I didn't want to think that about this situation. Like, why is that even in my head? Like, That's a rude thought. I don't want to think that. Or that's a self-defeating thought. Like, why do I want to think that? It is very difficult to control your mind. Do you have any techniques to help?
I guess I try to do, sort of the opposite. It kind of goes with that second truth. So, you know, our brains are hardwired. I mean, this is just a survival mechanism. They're hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort and to seek pleasure. So to the brain, the status quo is good. Don't mess with it. Everything's good. You and I probably both know people. I'm going to use this as an example. That are in dead end jobs, and they've been in dead end jobs for a while. And you kind of look at them like, why don't you find something else that's more compatible with your skill set, that would challenge you more and stuff like that. But if you think about it, as soon as those people are going, decide, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to start looking for a new job, your brain is going to kick in and be like, whoa, wait a minute. Status quo is good. The job here is easy. The work is easy. You're making good money. You get along with your coworkers. You go somewhere else, you might not get along with those people. Do you really want to find a new job? And I think people get paralyzed by that. It's like, well, yeah, that's a good point. I don't want to do that. But again, if you look at the status quo, the only way you're going to grow, the only way you're going to improve yourself is if you step outside that status quo. If you start to do things that, quite frankly, scare you or, that may cause you embarrassment. And I always tell, especially young people, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you feel you want to do or that you should do, and it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then, it's going to be too late to go back and do them. So instead of running from pain and discomfort, like we know people, I know people who, ran to a bottle or ran to drugs or ran to bad behavior and things like that. What if you did the opposite? What if you took that? What if you just flipped it inside and burned it as fuel or used it as energy to make you a stronger and more determined individual? And that's what I do. When I go for these clinical trials, there are days that I get stuck, 18, 19, 20 times with a needle to draw blood, to do all kinds of stuff. That's 20 times. That sucks. I hate it. But it's like, okay, that's fine. It's going to make me stronger. Do it again. You're going to make me stronger. Do it again. It's going to make me stronger. So instead of running from it, maybe take that pain and flip it inside and use it to make you tougher.
So the second pillar was embrace the pain and suffering, right?
Embrace the pain and discomfort. Remember, pain is inevitable. Suffering, that's optional.
Okay. And then the first one is control your mind, correct?
Right.
So the third one is what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people.
Yeah. That's a legacy truth. That's, what are people going to say about you at your funeral? And again, I'm not telling people that, you should change, to make other people happy. I'm not telling you that at all. But what are people going to say about you at your funeral? In certain cultures, maybe not so much here in the US, but in certain cultures, your ancestors are important to you. What would your ancestors say about the life that you have lived? There's an old Native American Blackfoot proverb that I heard years ago that I love. And it goes like this. It says, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I want my life to be about. I want to rejoice when I move on to whatever is next after I die.
Well, I feel like this is like a talk that's specifically meant for me because I feel like I've been going through all this. Like, specifically, like, I'll have thoughts like of, trying to control your mind, the basic. And I get almost this existential period where I'm like, oh shoot, what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? Like, what are people going to think of me? Like, what are they going to write on my tombstone? Like, that's the question I ask. Like, what will my friends think of my memories? And that question has haunted me for the longest time. And like you were saying earlier, it hasn't been my fear of doing the wrong thing. It's the fear of not doing something that gives me anxiety. Not doing anything gives me that anxiety. And I just, no matter the circumstances and no matter how I live my life, I don't want to say that I was just another number, like, and I didn't do anything to contribute to like the well-being or to contribute to the next generation. Like that's my biggest fear. That's my biggest fear.
And it's interesting because playing athletics, playing team sports for me has taught me a lot of things. But one of the things it's taught me is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than you. And in team sports that if you don't do your job, not only are you letting yourself down, but you're letting your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, your friends down, etc. And recently I had a nurse. When I first started on this clinical trial, this nurse was caring for me with another nurse. The nurse was still a nurse, but she was basically in training in the unit. And a couple months ago, she was taking care of me on her own. And she said, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I'm kind of embarrassed to tell you. I'm like, just tell me. If you really want to tell me, tell me. And she said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I'd had a very good friend of mine that had died, and I was in a very dark place. And she's young. She's probably about 25 years old. And she said, I talked to my parents. I was going to quit nursing, and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, then I met you, and I heard your story, and I see what you go through physically during this clinical trial. And I knew I was in the right place. I knew I was going to stay in nursing. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had a positive impact on her. So I always ask people, who's out there, who's watching you, Dylan? Who's watching me, who we never know, but they're watching us. They're watching what we're doing. They're watching how we conduct ourselves. They're watching what we do at work, at the store, in the neighborhood, whatever you're doing. And they're like, you know what? I want to be like Dylan. But you never know that. You have no idea who your life is having an impact on. And I always remember that. That's always kind of tucked in the back of my mind, that no matter what I do, and again, I'm not talking about living for other people. You've got to be true to yourself and live your own life. Right. But on the other hand, there was an old basketball coach at UCLA back in the 1970s by the name of John Wooden. And he had a great quote, and it was this: a careful person I want to be, a little person follows me. I dare not go astray for fear they may go the same way. And I love that quote because it kind of illustrates this: who's watching you, who's emulating you, who wants to be like you. And if you think about that, it kind of, for me, it's like, I want to make sure every day is a good day. I want to make sure every day is a positive day, because I have no idea who's watching how I conduct myself.
Yeah, I don't think I ever thought about it that way. I don't think I thought about it as if someone was watching me with the intent to follow behind, or I guess to emulate. Now that you feel like that, I guess there's a lot more pressure, right?
Only if you let it. I mean, again, I'm not telling you to be anything other than your authentic self.
Totally get it.
Think of the impact that, again, I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they were talking about, what if nobody shows up at my funeral? Like, what if nobody does? That doesn't mean your life didn't have an impact. That just may be, somebody you met 10 years ago who saw you and said, I want to be like that. They didn't know you died, and they didn't show up at your funeral. That doesn't mean your life doesn't have an impact if only 5 people show up at your funeral, So it's like, don't think of it that way. Think about all the times that you had interaction with people, and maybe they walked away and said, hey, that guy's squared away, or I want to be like that person, or whatever it ends up being that they're saying.
You're definitely making an impact. Your story is very powerful. You definitely have an energy that's communicated very strongly, even via Zoom, like through webcam. You have this uncanny and unnatural ability to exude strength. Really, it's almost as though that you like, just sitting here talking with you. It's just like, yeah, everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be okay. No need to worry. Just relax. Control your mind. Everything's gonna be okay. That's how it
Everything
feels.
is going to be okay.
And, for the longest time, I always had the short-sighted thought of action and consequence, right? And we always see things as the immediate consequence, and we don't know how to determine whether those consequences are good or bad. We just sometimes see the reaction of our actions. So, for example, like maybe you're driving, you get into a car accident, and we're like, oh shoot, like that's like, why did I have to go on this road this day at this time? Oh my goodness, that was such a bad consequence that stemmed from me leaving 5 minutes late for work, or something stupid like that. Just making this random example. So let me know if this doesn't make sense, okay?
I will.
But we don't think so far ahead that we didn't know that interaction, like for some reason, one way or another, that car crash led us to interact with maybe the doctors or something, maybe a mechanic, or maybe somebody that we needed to talk to at a car dealership, where we ended up getting a new car and making a relationship with that person, and then maybe somehow connecting with that person. And we never see the whole thing played out until it's hindsight. We're like, oh wow, that's what all that
You're
was
right.
leading up to.
And that was always something when I was a policeman that I always tried to remember that, if I pulled you over for speeding or for running a stop sign or something like that, our interaction may have been the most stressful thing that happens to you all year. But for me, it's the third traffic stop of the night, and it's my job.
Right.
So I always remembered that, and I always wanted to know people I arrested. Tell me about you, because I don't care. If you're a crackhead or whatever you are, there's still somebody somewhere that loves you. There's still somebody somewhere that cares about you. And so I wanted to know. And when I was in the drug unit, we would do search warrants and, have SWAT kick in doors and, all the cool kind of stuff. But the bottom line is somebody got arrested and somebody went to jail. And I always used to ask, and unfortunately, most of the people that I arrested were young minority men. And I always asked them, what are your goals? What are your dreams? What are your desires? And the sad thing about it was most of them couldn't answer that question. Most of them were like, you know what, I'm living fast because I know 6 months from now, a year from now, the drug dealer down the street is going to come here and shoot me and kill me and, take over and so I don't have any goals. I don't have any dreams. And I thought, how sad is that these young men don't have, and some of them were really smart. I mean, it took us a while to catch them and stuff like that. And I used to think, God, if you could use that energy, if you could use that brain power for something that was positive, instead of spending your whole life looking over your shoulder, wondering, are the police coming for me? Is the dope dealer down the street coming for me? What a horrible way to live your life.
Is there anybody that you may have interacted with in your police officer days? Like you arrested them and then maybe years later you met them on the street and they turned their life around?
No.
No.
I mean, there was a guy who hung around with the dope boys, but his issue was he would drive without a valid driver's license, which was misdemeanor kind of stuff. He didn't have felony convictions or anything like that. And I remember one night, my partner and I, pulled up on the corner and we grabbed him and we handcuffed him and we put him in the car and we took him up behind the high school. And I'm sure he thought we were going to beat the hell out of him or something like that. I mean, which we never did anything like that.
Of course.
I'm sure he was like, I'm scared to death. And we unhandcuffed him. We took him out of the car and we're like, here's the deal. You do not have a bad record. What my partner and I were willing, he owed $500 to get his license reinstated. My partner and I were going to pay to have his license reinstated. We had a guy who was going to work with him to get his GED, and we had another guy who was going to give him a job during the day.
That's
and we
awesome.
kind of laid that out for him. We presented that to him like, look, we think you have potential and you're going down a road and you're hanging out with people that don't have your best interest in mind. What do you think about that? I mean, we're willing to do this for you because we think you have potential.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, was it? I mean, what do you think he said?
Probably something that wasn't too nice now.
He said no.
Hmm.
He said, I don't want to do that. And about a year later, he got caught pulling an armed robbery and got 15 years in the Ohio penitentiary. So, I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And, I mean, that was one thing that we knew. We tried to help this person, but if they don't want your help, you can't force them to do anything like that. But there again, I think my partner and I kind of different. We looked at the people we arrested as people. And I was in business for a while. And there's the 80-20 rule in business. 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. Well, in law enforcement, it's the same way. 80% of the crime comes from 20% of the criminals. And if you're a good beat officer, you know who those people are. You know what they look like. You know who they hang out with. You know where they live. You know where their baby's mama live. You know where their mother lives. I mean, and so when an investigator comes to you, you're like, oh yeah, that's so and so. That's Peanut or whatever their nickname is. And yeah, I can tell you where he lives and where you can find him and stuff like that. So yeah, unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, I never ran into somebody years later who said, hey, you turned my life around. But then again, you don't know who we did turn their life around, and we'll never know that.
Yeah, there could be somebody that you interacted with, and later down the line they'll say, I had a interaction with Officer Tucker, and he set me straight. We have a couple people joining in chat. We have David. Hey, David. Sorry, I'm getting a little late to responding to everybody. What's up, Del? How are you doing? Josh in here. I just got in here. You talk about getting into a car accident. I'm so sorry, Josh. You got PTSD. I'm so sorry, buddy. Is it the environment? I think back to the story of your, of the one guy that said no and turned you down. Do you think it's the environment that he's in? Do you think if he was, did he go right back to the same environment that he was in, or was he taken to jail? I mean, what happened right after he said no?
No, I mean, he didn't do anything wrong. I mean,
Right.
we just needed to get him away from his buddies to kind of present this opportunity to him. And
Right.
so it was like, look, we'll drive you wherever you want us to drive you, or you can just walk from here. It's up to you. And he just walked away, and like I said, it was shortly after that I ended up going to the drug unit, and then my partner, they needed a female, and she went to the drug unit, and we just heard, about a year later, hey, so-and-so got arrested for armed robbery and 15 years in the Ohio penitentiary. Now he's got a felony conviction. I mean, his life's pretty much ruined at that point in time.
That really sucks.
It did.
It really sucks because he had an opportunity. He had a doorway out, didn't take it. I wonder.
Again,
Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, again, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it.
Yeah, I just wonder what could be done. I know you guys did everything in your power to do it. It's just like, what would it take? What would it have taken to get him to say yes?
I think, in all honesty, a good family structure. I mean, and he didn't have that. I mean, when I was a policeman in Cincinnati, we had a curfew. And I remember one night, my partner and I grabbed up a 13-year-old kid. It was in October, so and it was a school night. It was like a Wednesday. And when you arrested somebody for curfew, you took them home. They were juveniles, and you cited their parents to court. And so we go home. We take the kid home, and we knock on the door, and here's 75-year-old grandmother who he lives with, because mom's a crackhead and dad's in prison. And grandma's 75 years old. She goes to bed at 7:00 at night. So what's a 13-year-old kid going to do but go out on the street and hang out? And, you look at that and you're like, that kid doesn't stand a chance. There, he has no family structure. He has nobody guiding him, down here. Here's what you need to do here. Stay in school, go play a sport, get involved in something. Don't be out on the street at 3:00 in the morning on a school night,
Yeah, it's definitely the guidance that's lacking. So we have this fourth pillar or fourth truth. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
I kind of sort of did when I talked about, my pain, anybody's pain ending at a certain point in time, whether it's through medication, whether it's through surgery, whether it's through dying. And, again, if I quit, if I give in, if I give up, then I'll always have pain. Pain will always follow me, whether it's a mental pain or an emotional pain, and, it may not be a physical pain. So, just not quitting, not giving up. Again, I say this, like it's easy to do. It's not easy to do. It's also, there's always, everybody has a breaking point.
Right.
And there was a professor at Johns Hopkins University back in the 1950s who did an experiment with rats. And what he did is he took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long they could tread water. And the average rat was about 15 minutes. And just as the rats were about ready to drown, he would grab them, pull them out of the tank, dry them off, let them rest for a while, and then he put them back in the tank again. How long do you think the rats treaded water the second time?
I would assume a little bit longer. Is that right?
You would assume right, but it was a whole lot longer. It was 60 hours.
60 hours?
60 hours.
No way.
And that showed me two things. One, the importance of hope in our lives. These rats knew from the first time that, hey, I'm getting ready to drown. Oh, wait a minute. I just got rescued. Somebody gave me hope. Somebody took care of me, pulled me out, dried me off, let me rest for a while before they put me back in. So the importance of hope was number one. And the second thing is just how much our bodies can do. The obstacles that we put in our path, or that are put in our path, a lot of times are put in our path by ourselves. But, we put them in our path. So a rat can go for 60 hours because he has hope that somebody's going to come and rescue him. And his body can do that. The Navy SEALs talk about their 40% rule, where what that says is if you can't do another push-up, if you can't run another, step or anything like that, you're only at 40% of your maximum and you still have 60% left to give to yourself. So between the Navy SEAL 40% rule and this study by this doctor at Johns Hopkins, I've kind of realized that, and I think I'm a perfect example of, you can do so much more than you ever thought you could do. Your limits are really what your brain puts on yourself, but your physical body can do so much more than you ever thought it could do.
So then how do we break those limits?
You keep going. I'm going to go out for a 5-mile run. Oh, 3 miles, I got a cramp. I can't, it's kind of, I think most people have seen the movie Rocky,
Right.
the original Rocky. And if you kind of go back to that scene where, he's going to fight Apollo Creed, he just found out, and now he's got to start training. And, he gets up, the alarm clock goes off at 4:00 in the morning. And, he turns on the transistor radio, and, they're in Philadelphia. And, if you listen in the background while he's cracking those 5 raw eggs into that cup, which is everybody, it's gross and that. But if you listen in the background, it's going to be 28 degrees for the high in Philadelphia that day. And, he sucks down those eggs. I mean, I start thinking about that. How many people are going to get up at 4:00 in the morning to follow their dreams? How many people are going to brave the cold? He puts on his old gray sweatsuit, wraps a towel around his head, puts a hat, or a towel around his neck, puts a hat on his head, and he goes outside, to start training. How many people would be like, oh, wait a minute, I need the latest moisture wicking equipment or, clothing before I go do that. Or, I need the top of the line running shoes, or wait a minute, I need a buddy to go run with me. But Rocky doesn't have any of those. And he still continues to train as he runs alone in the dark down the street. And then, he gets to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and, he's got this massive cramp in his side, and he's got to go up the 72 steps to the top of it. And when he gets there, he turns around, he looks over the city of Philadelphia, And I'm sure in his mind, it's like, and I got to do this again tomorrow, only I got to be better. That's how you get through that stuff. That's, you suck it up, you take that pain, you turn it inside, you burn it as fuel, you use it as energy, and you get through what you need to get through. And then you do it again tomorrow. And then you do it the next day. And then you do it the next day. Too many people are willing to quit and to just give up because I didn't have the right breakfast. It's 4:00 in the morning. I don't have the right clothing. I don't have my running buddy. I got a cramp in my side. Too many people are willing to quit. If you don't quit, it's amazing what your body can do.
Where is the dividing line then between keep pushing and don't give up and I'm damaging myself? Is there a dividing line? Is there something that says, listen, like, you should probably quit? Like, I know it said don't quit, but you should probably quit. Like, sit back, buddy. Like, you've done enough. Is there a line that we shouldn't cross, or how do we identify that?
I think if you're hurting yourself, physically, yes, you should probably quit. There are some people that even, that kind of are, I don't know if you've heard, there's a former Navy SEAL by the name of David Goggins, who has a great book out called Can't Hurt Me. But this guy is an ultra marathoner. I mean, he will run to the point where he will break all the bones in his feet during a run. And then he'll go home and take go to bed and then get up the next morning and run 8 more miles. This guy is just, I don't know how to describe him. He's unbelievable when it comes to kind of compartmentalizing physical pain and continuing to move forward. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think everybody should do that. I don't think they should. If you're physically damaging yourself, he has, he's run so much that, he's breaking down his kidneys and he's, urinating blood and things like that. Yeah, I would say that's too much. He wouldn't, but he's the kind of guy that, is the epitome of your body can do so much more even after it's damaged. And I certainly, I've seen, as a police officer, I've seen people shot 4 or 5 times in the chest up walking around. It's amazing how much damage your body can take in continuing to move forward. But I certainly wouldn't encourage anybody to harm themselves in keeping, in trying to keep yourself moving forward.
Of course. I just want to know what the dividing line is, because normally I think people can easily get a sense of where the dividing line is physically. Like if we're running and it's like, or if you're lifting weights, it's like, all right, one more set, one more time. Maybe I could do one more rep. I could do this for 5-10 more minutes. I understand physically. The line becomes a little bit more diluted and vague when we talk about mental perseverance, and when we talk about, how much do you keep grinding and working towards like a goal or a dream before it becomes detrimental to you and maybe other relationships around you? Because that one's a little bit harder to determine, right? Like, at least physical pain, there's somewhat of a sense in our body, and our body's like, hey, you should probably quit, dude. Like, don't do that at all. But at least with mental perseverance and not giving up, I totally agree with you. I think people are stronger than what they think they are, but there definitely becomes a level of perseverance and not giving up to where it can become almost toxic, like workaholics, right? These are probably
where you need balance, right?
Yeah.
You need that balance in your life, and I think we all do. We all need that balance. But again, it just depends on how bad you want something, and a lot of times people, I'm really trying, I'm trying. Okay, I'm in college now and I'm trying, but I'm not getting good grades. Okay, well, what are you comparing that to? Well, I'm comparing it to what the effort I put forth in high school. Well, guess what? You're in college now. So you're going to have to put forth more effort in college than you did in high school. So don't compare where you are now to where you were, because it's like comparing apples and oranges. High school was different than college. Right. So how bad do you want it? And again, how bad do you want to get that A? And what are you doing to do that? And a lot of people think, I've done all I could do. Oh, I guarantee you haven't done all you can do. I can promise you that. I can promise you that. Yeah, I mean, there's always more you can do. I always think about Kobe Bryant was a basketball player on the Los Angeles Lakers. And I remember a story I heard about him where one night in a game, he went up for a shot and somebody hit him on the elbow. It wasn't called as a foul and he missed the shot and the Lakers lost the game. So after playing a full NBA game, Kobe takes one of the managers into the practice gymnasium and puts up 10,000 shots where every time he shoots, the manager hits him in the elbow, hits him in the elbow, hits him in the elbow. You can do a whole lot more to get better than you think you are doing right now. I can promise you that.
That's fair. It's very fair. I totally agree with you. I think mental strength is definitely, and I had this conversation the other day, actually, when it pertained to suicide awareness and people's coping strategies. I think that's kind of applicable here. I definitely think people's mental strength is a lot stronger than what they think. Dell says, great point. Wait, great point for the Kobe Bryant, Mr. Terry Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, and again, I understand that there are people out there that need medication, that need to be under a doctor's care and things like that. I'm not talking about those people.
Of course.
I'm talking about the rest of us that quit just because we get a little twinge of pain or because this is hard. You know what? If it was easy, everybody would do it. The hard, and this is a quote from a movie called A League of Their Own. The hard is what makes it good. Putting yourself through all this and coming out the other end stronger, tougher, more determined, more successful. That's what makes all the crap that we go through for it. That's what makes it worth it.
That's what makes the greats.
Yeah.
It's the mental fortitude and the ability to keep persevering.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about, I remember, and I'm going to probably mess up this quote, about a hero being somebody who's braver 5 minutes longer than everybody else.
It's a good quote.
Yeah.
Do you think people are, I guess, currently in the current climate of 2021, do you think people are more sensitive or not as strong in general?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I look back on, there was a book that Tom Brokaw, used to be a news anchor on NBC, wrote called The Greatest Generation. And it was about the young men and women, who volunteered in World War II, said, hey, and I look at that today and I those people were like, how can I help? How can I make a difference? And again, I'm making huge generalizations. It's
for the purpose of entertainment. Let's keep
going. There you go.
But
But today you see a lot of people that are like, what's in it for me? If nothing's in it for me, then I'm not doing it. And I, again, I go back to kind of team sports for me, where, if you're in a team sport, you don't do your job, you let all these people down. Well, if you think about it, the greatest team sport that we all play is the game of life. So if you look at it as what's in it for me, then that's all you care. That's not a team. You might as well go play golf or tennis. I always tell, if you don't want to play team sport, go play golf or tennis, because that way it's all about you. But in a reality, it's not. And if you think about how, instead of being what's in it for me, if you flip that around and said, how can I help? Then what's in it for me, those people leave and it becomes, it's not about you. It's about us. It's about us together, and together we can do anything. But individually, we're not going to get a lot accomplished.
When do we switch that narrative? When do you think that change took place between the greatest generation and I guess today? Do you think that started with maybe a couple years ago, started with social media? When do you think that shift? I
think if I have to blame somebody, and I don't really want to do that, I think
entertainment here.
it's my generation. It's my generation who were helicopter parents. Everybody's special. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody's a winner. No, Everybody's not a winner. I'm sorry. Somebody's got to be second. Somebody's got to be third. Somebody's got to be fourth. Just because you get a trophy doesn't mean, you're good at this. I'll never forget my brother's a basketball coach in Chicago, and one of his assistants works for a large company. And one day he's at work, and the big boss comes into his office, and he's like, who's Mary Smith? Oh, Mary Smith's this new woman we just hired right out of college. Why? Is there some problem with her? It's like, well, Mary Smith's mother just called me and wanted to know why Mary Smith couldn't be home for Christmas this year.
Oh, no.
And the big boss was like,
no.
I mean, the guy who was responsible for Mary was like, do you want me to call her mother? And he's like, no, I'll call her mother. I'll tell her Mary can certainly be home for Christmas this year, but she probably won't have a job in January.
Mom, if you're watching, please don't call my company. Okay?
Exactly. I mean, you know what? We all got to go through tough times. And, you can't have somebody bail you out every time. Again, it goes back to, you got a little bit of pain, I got to quit. Well, what if you push through that pain? What if you burn that pain as fuel to make you stronger? Could you do more? You absolutely could do more.
Yeah, Mom, please don't. Please, if you're watching, please don't call my company and ask why I can't be home. Oh, yikes. Oh, my goodness. That. I wonder how she felt.
You wonder. I mean, you obviously figure she complained to her mother, oh, Mom, I can't be home for Christmas because I got to work. Well,
oh, my goodness.
No, you don't have to work.
You think there's any redemption? You think there's any redemption for this generation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I mean, as I mentioned, our daughter's a graduate of the Air Force Academy, and I definitely have seen a lot of good, caring, decent people, young people, who want to make a difference.
My mom's in the chat. She said, I would not do that.
Your mom said that?
Yeah,
good job, Mom. Way to go.
She's in the chat. She said, I would not do that. That's hilarious.
Way to go, Mom. I like Mom.
No, my mom has been the same way. I mean, she let me fail when I needed to fail, but she was there to, help ease the pain or ease the suffering.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I told you I'm 6'8" and play basketball. Well, our daughter got my height and went to the Air Force Academy, was recruited there to play basketball. And when she made that decision to go there, I said to her, okay, there's other coaches that are in on you that want you to go to their schools. You've made your decision. Now you need to call them and let them know. And here's what my daughter said. No, I'll send them a text. And I'm like, oh, no, you won't. You will not send them a text. You're going to call them because, I mean, some of them, have come multiple times to see you play and, been to the house and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, you're going to call them. She said, well, I just want to send a text. I said, I know you want to do that, but this is about relationships.
Absolutely.
You've developed a relationship. You're going to call them. We had to role play the calls. And the good thing about it was some coaches from smaller schools that weren't as academically, as good as the Air Force Academy, they got mad at her. They, a couple of them yelled at her. Really? And I was like,
for what?
Good. It's like, what do you mean you're going to the Air Force Academy? How come you're not coming? And it's like, and I told her afterwards, I said, what do you think about that? What did you learn from that? And she's like, I don't know. I said, well, what I learned is that coach could have cared less about you as a person and what you were going to get out of this. And all they cared about was what you could do for them athletically on the basketball court. I said, that's what I learned about that. It's like, that's not a coach you wanted to play for. So you made a good decision there, but you didn't know that until you actually called the person. If you would have just texted them, you would have had no idea that that's how they felt.
See, they were getting into long enough. If we laid it out long enough, we can see hindsight a little bit better. There we go. Destined to be.
It was.
We have Dell saying, there is always redemption. Previous generations have had it way worse or had way worse issues. I got you.
I mean, we all experience, I mean, people look at, you've really suffered, and Winston Churchill had a great quote, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II. He said, when you're going through hell, keep going. Every generation faces something. and every generation either rises to it or doesn't. But we're the United States of America. I mean, we are, in my mind, this is the best country that's ever been. This is the best place. And you always hear, you hear in the news and stuff like that, how horrible the left is or how horrible the right is. I've always believed that 80% of this country were good, decent, honest, caring people who just wanted what was the best for their family, their community, and their country. But what gets reported in the media every night is that 10% on the left and that 10% on the right.
It's the loud, what is it? What's the quote? The silent majority and the loud minority.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I agree with you. I think generally speaking, most people are good people. Like, you could literally go outside right now to your neighbor and they'd be really cool with you. Go to the grocery store. Any interactions. I have not had any one negative interaction. But according to the news, everybody around me, is a traitor or, a conspiracy theorist or whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter. It's wild.
I learned that when I was a police officer. One night I was on I work nights and I was at a particular crime scene. And I came home, I got off at 7:00 and my wife was getting dinner from our daughter or getting breakfast for our daughter and her. And the TV was on and she was like, oh, that's terrible. Were you there? I said, yeah, I was there. That never happened. What they're reporting never happened. Let me tell you how it really happened. And wow. It was kind of like, whoa, okay, the media just blatantly lied about a crime that happened overnight that I was at. So it's like, no, that didn't happen.
Wow, that's wild.
It was.
Should be.
But it's the old saying, if it bleeds, it leads. So
there needs to be some accountability. That's a different topic for a different time, though.
Yep.
We are at 9:00, though. Gina says, the truth is, real strength is in Christ. That is my mom.
I agree with that.
So we are at 8:57 right now. Got a couple minutes left before we wrap up. Do you have any supplementary material, any books, anywhere people can find you to continue following you?
Yeah, I have a blog. I put up a thought for the day, a motivational thought for the day that's usually followed by a question that I ask to kind of get you to think about it. On Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message, which is usually a story or a video. They're always short. I realize people are pressed for time, so need a quick hit of inspiration or motivation. My site is Motivational Check. So motivationalcheck.com will get you to that site. It's also my social media links are there as well. I wrote a book last year called Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. That's available pretty much anywhere you can get a book online, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks, all that kind of stuff. So
perfect. That's
pretty much how you can get to me.
Motivational Check should actually be in the description section of the YouTube channel. I think I posted it in there, so please be sure to check out his channel and his webpage. Make sure you leave a comment down in the description section and like the video, guys. Everybody, thank you for coming out tonight to daydream with us. This has been Mr. Terry Tucker. I really have appreciated this conversation. You are just an incredible inspiration and just a strong personality with a strong will that is contagious.
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you. Mr. Terry, I'm going to keep you over here for just a second. Everybody, thank you again for daydreaming with us. I hope you all have a fantastic night. We got Dell with the emojis. Love you, everybody. Thank you. See you next week.